get this webinar started. So first, I'm going to thank everyone for attending this afternoon. And I'm Sherry Garmise. I'm the Executive Director for Collective Urban and Regional Impact in the Division of Community Engagement here at VCU. This is probably a kickoff of a webinar series we hope to do every year, which is part of, again, a fairly newly launched Applied Community Engagement badge, of which attendees who come and enjoy the video can then, we'll send probably early next week some reflection activities. You can complete those also for Connect 2023 and our Martin Luther King keynote reception. All three of them are also available to be viewed. Complete the reflective activities, and you can get the Applied Community Engagement badge. We will follow up also with more information on how to do that. But this is part of that series, and we're really proud and thrilled to welcome the Richmond Cemetery Collaboratory as our first community partnership to be featured in our Community Engagement Practices webinar. We invited them because they represent really the highest level of community partnership. Not only have they been working together for many years, providing outcome after outcome for the community, for our faculty, and for our students. And this is something that really we should all learn from, and learn from all of the perspectives that come to the table. So what we've done is we've actually invited the range of partners, not all of them, because it's actually quite a comprehensive partnership, but we have a range of different perspectives, and we're going to look at how the collaboratory partnership works through that variety of lenses. So what I'm going to do is, in fact, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves and tell us their name, what organization or perspective they represent on the webinar, and then 1 to 3 words that they would use to describe what the partnership has meant to them, either personally or from their organizational perspective. So I'll call their names, but I would ask them to invite them. So I'm actually going to get started. I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. So Terry Dolson, I'm going to ask you to do it first.
Great, thank you. I'm Terry Dolson at the University of Richmond Bonner Center for Civic Engagement. I work with community engaged learning and faculty and classes, and some with research. Derek will talk more about that. 3 words: educational, connective, and inspiring.
Thank you. And in fact, next in alphabetical order is Derek. So,
hi everyone, Derek Miller. I'm the Associate Director of Community Engaged Research, Scholarship, and Relationships at the Bonner Center for Civic Engagement at the University of Richmond. That was a whole lot of stuff. Words strung together. But representing the University of Richmond perspective, 3 words: innovation, energizing, and perspective.
Excellent. Next in order is Ryan Smith.
Hey everybody, Ryan Smith. I'm a faculty member in the History Department at Virginia Commonwealth University. I'm also serving as the faculty co-leader for the Collaboratory for the last few years. And Terry and Derek took some of my words that I was going to say: inspiring, energizing for sure. I would add sacred, not in the fact that I think that we're doing sacred work, but I think we're always aware that we're engaging with sacred spaces, and we take that obviously really, really seriously. So it's been a quality of the work that we're quite aware of and sensitive to, hopefully.
And then Will.
Hello, my name is Will Teeples. I am a recent graduate of the VCU Wilder School's Master of Urban and Regional Planning program. I worked with the Collaboratory as a GIS technician, and I'm still somewhat engaged, like through volunteer projects and working with the descendants. I think this project has been very enlightening. And I would have to agree with Terry, Derek, and Ryan that it's just been very inspiring as well. I know that's only 2, but I think those are the most important ones to me.
I said 1 to 3, so you're all good. And Loretta, last but not least.
unmute.
Okay, can everybody hear?
Yes.
I'm Loretta Tillman. I'm a member of the Descendants Council of Greater Richmond. My 3 words would be connection for community. We need a lot of assistance. And the Collaboratory, amongst others, is helping to provide that.
Excellent, thank you. So I think the way we're gonna set up the rest of the webinar is I'm gonna pass it to Ryan, who's going to introduce the work of the Collaboratory. And then we're gonna have a Q&A with all of the panelists on the screen to sort of, again, get their perspective on what it means to work in such a partnership. And then we'll open it up at the end for audience Q&A, which you can use. We have the Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. So with that, Ryan, I'm going to pass it to you.
Great. Well, yeah, just for a few minutes to get us all on the same page, I'll see if I can summarize the work of the Collaboratory. And it's such a visual project. I do have some slides, so I'm going to share my screen and see if we can see some of the images of the kind of work that we've done. So here we are with some students and partners at a workday at East End Cemetery. You can see the community partners that we have on the right this current year. The Descendants Council, the Friends of East End, the Woodland Restoration Foundation, the Library of Virginia, obviously VCU and UR as well. And the whole thing started in 2017 as what we might think of as a faculty learning group with community partners in that faculty learning group and representatives from those community groups, primarily the Friends of East End, and it's since expanded to encompass and include these other community partners as well. And you can see our mission statement up there. I'd also encourage people to take a look at our website after the webinar, that's cemeterycollaboratory.org. We'll have a lot of the materials that I'm just going to go very quickly through today. But you can see our mission statement there, seeking to document and support African-American history and culture via the region's cemeteries. We're seeking to restore the commemorative functions of these historic African-American cemeteries and to recognize the stories of the people buried therein. So there's a capsule of what we're about. Maybe a different way to think about what the Collaboratory is to look at its various parts, the way we're put together. And so we've got a number of co-leaders, myself, Megan Goff, Janine Kiefer from the faculty, our community partners, as I've listed this year. We can see on the underlined names are the individual representatives. We're so happy to have Loretta from the Descendants Council here with us today, but you can see the other names of those representatives from the other respective community groups that are our partners. You can see our University of Richmond faculty. This is a long list of all those who have engaged with the Collaboratory as fellows over the years. The ones that are underlined are our current faculty fellows from UR. Same with VCU's list of faculty fellows. The underlines are those that are active this year. And then we would certainly not be where we are today, literally, without Derek and Terry and Sherry and Maguba from the Bonner Center and the Office of Community Engagement here at VCU. And we've received funding primarily from UR and VCU in their various offices and agencies over the years. We begin in 2017, we were focused on a single cemetery, and that is East End Cemetery on the east side of Richmond, Virginia. You can see the general map there on the left, and East End is adjoining a much larger cemetery of Evergreen. Both were founded in the 1890s by African-American organizations during Jim Crow, when burial options for Black Richmonders were quite restricted because of those Jim Crow laws and customs. And so this was an initiative from the Black community to provide a dignified space of burial for their loved ones that was not available to them otherwise. Over the ensuing decades, there was thousands of burials. There were challenges, financial challenges, structural racism, vandalism. And so when we began to connect at the site, Here's a view of the entrance road into East End Cemetery in 2013, before a volunteer effort from Evergreen began to target East End Cemetery. And then just 5 years later, as a result of the great work of the Friends of East End and a little bit of help from our students and other community partners, this is what that same scene looked like just 5 years later in 2018. And so this is what you will see as you enter into East End Cemetery today. We can go on and see that other aspects of our work have involved not just volunteering and work days on the ground and learning about the sites there in person and engaging with descendants there, but also creating an online repository, an online archive of at least 10,000 original documents related to those who are buried. Initially, it was just for those buried in East End Cemetery, but it has since expanded to include many of the other African-American cemeteries in our region. And so I invite you to follow that link. You can also find that through our Cemetery Collaboratory website and see all the different ways that you can learn about the lives of those buried in these cemeteries. Mapping has been a big part of our efforts. Here's the first map that we produced in partnership with the Friends of East End by hand plotting over 3,000 grave sites and grave markers, and then even going beyond that with the technology to be able to map over 8,000 burial depressions, including those who did not have markers. And this was a real challenge because none of the historic maps or plot maps of the cemetery have survived. And so we were trying to create a resource that would help visitors and families navigate the cemetery. We've been able to reproduce that mapping initiative at others that needed similar kinds of interface and interaction and research. And so here's the Barton Heights Cemeteries map that we produced a few years ago. Those grave markers date back to 1827 for free people of color in the city of Richmond. Here's a look at our students and community partners. There's Loretta and Megan and Eric Lazaro, also the Descendants Council. There's Will, also on the far right, meeting with representatives from the city staff. And on the bottom left, you can see some of that mapping effort taking place too. And so having conversations with the descendants, having conversations with the city as stewards of the site, and doing research at the cemeteries. And then bringing that research into the public. We held usually every year a venue for students and community members and families to have discussions about the work that the students are doing, about their engagement with the cemetery. And so here we can see some story maps being presented from Megan Goff's graduate class, who was looking at Barton Heights and Woodland Cemetery that we held at the Richmond Public Library just a year ago. And then in the little boxes on the right, you can see Bernard Means showing with his students some of their 3D printed objects from 3D scans. And then the bottom right is just a clip from a video showing Loretta and some of the others. You can see an encapsulation of this event in a short 10-minute video available on our website. We had a wonderful panel discussion at the end of it, in which folks like Loretta offered some reflection and feedback on what they saw in the students' work. I mentioned the 3D scanning, that virtual curation lab at VCU has been a really important partner. Bernard Means and his students have come out to the cemeteries, have documented the various grave markers using these 3D scanning methods, and are able to do 3D prints or offer 3D models online. Here's one at Woodland, one at Barton Heights. Kiara Lee is a new member of the Collaboratory this year. She's teaching first-year freshmen, and she's had them investigating the cemeteries through the lens of critical literacy, and they've produced these zines, publications that are colorful, interesting, have a sharp point of view, use words and texts and photographs and artwork in really creative ways. And so here's just a brief example of the types of classes that have engaged with the Collaboratory and its work over the years. You can see from A almost to Z, anthropology all the way down to urban studies and plannings. For me, I'm a historian. It's been wonderful to see folks from biology, folks from dance, folks from sociology, bring classes into the cemeteries to find various ways to engage with the sites with their students. So here's, as I said, just a glance at the kinds of projects or classes that have been part of this work. We've also been able to find some grant funding at times to support descendant voices. The Friends of East End had a oral history project that you can find online. That's a really wonderful review of a few families connected to East End. And then on the right, some of the descendant voices in a short video walking the grounds of Evergreen and East End cemeteries and reflecting on the meaning of those sites for those families. And so the Collaboratory has been proud to be a part of that and try to help promote spaces for those voices. We've also reached out to cemeteries further afield, or had other cemeteries further afield reach out to us. And so just this past year, we've produced a map in partnership with folks connected to St. James Cemetery in Varina in Henrico County. In the bottom left, closer to home near the University of Richmond's campus, that Sons and Daughters of Ham Cemetery we've engaged with. On the bottom right, as far north as Caroline County, there's a historic cemetery there known as Oliver Cemetery that we've produced a map with. And so our partners and our sites that we've engaged with have grown far beyond just that initial East End cemetery that we started, although we continue to hopefully maintain a great relationship there at East End too. And then lastly, my last slide would be to show that the work that we've created with the Collaboratory has been a model for some other localities. Down in Durham, North Carolina, we've got colleagues who have created, as you can see here, the Durham Black Burial Grounds Collaboratory, connected primarily with Geer Cemetery, but also a few other historic African-American burial grounds there in the Durham region, and also connecting not only with Duke University, but with North Carolina Central University. And so it's really been wonderful and an honor, and back to our words that we started with, inspiring to see all of this blossom from pretty simple, humble beginnings there with just a handful of faculty and one community partner at one site. So that's my very quick tour through some of our cemetery spaces and some of the work of our partners and our students.
So, wow, thank you. And I was going to also say, you can see all why the word inspiring comes up again and again when people ask what are the one or two words that really emerge from them, from this experience. So what I will invite people to do, but I will hold them for later. If you have any questions specifically around, the project or the partnership, please put them in the Q&A. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the Q&A with our panelists right now, but we will definitely get back to them at the end. So if you have those burning questions you have to ask from the presentation, please put them in, and we'll get back to them after we talk with the panelists for a bit. So what I'm going to actually do, and Ryan's put the Cemetery Collaboratory link in the chat. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk to each partner and get from there their perspective on the value and the challenges, because we know not everything always runs smooth as we'd like, from their experience working in the partnership. So we'll start with Terry and Derek from University of Richmond, and if you could talk to us a little bit about what makes an effective partnership among university partners, because that was that's one piece of the complexity of this partnership.
Thanks, and that's a great overview, Ryan. It's a lot to cover, so it was really great to see that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the fun and challenging things is, right, not just linking with community partners, but linking liberal arts university with a large R1, right? And how do we navigate those differences? And so we've been doing some self-studies asking these sort of questions. And so I'm going to name a few things that we kind of thought with, and Terry, please jump in if you want to expand. But one of the things we were thinking about that we felt has been important, that we've seen has been important, is faculty leadership. We've had some really wonderful faculty leaders. And from the beginning of the Collaboratory, that was really important, that faculty took a leadership role, right? It wasn't the center saying this is how this is going to be defined through that. Community partners, we've had amazing community partners, and we've made sure to honor them and reward them for their time and expertise. In this, our community partners have played such an essential role in the Collaboratory and guiding it. And I mean, one of the things that has been really important is we've had community partners who've been able to call us out and say when things need to be changed and not afraid to call us out on that, and make us check ourselves and say, okay, how can this shift and move to do that? So that's been super important. And I had said perspective is one of my words. And I think part of when you do this collaboration across so many different pieces is you get so many different perspectives, right? And I think getting those different perspectives, reminding yourself of the bigger story, and our community partners carry that, gives the work more energy and has given the work sort of a shared value, if you will, a shared moral perspective of sort of the problem that exists and how we can go about solving that. So finding that way, making sure the community partners, they come to every meeting, right? Play an essential role in planning and determining how the collaboratory goes forward has been key. And one of the things we keep on reminding yourself and having to do is making sure that the community partner expertise is brought forward. So Ryan mentioned the event at the library where students were sharing the work they did. When the collaboration started, we used to do that kind of at the end of the semester, as like, hey, our students did this work, let's report it back to the community. And what we realized is the community were the experts here, right? And so we moved the event further up in the semester so that the students would share, and then the community experts would provide feedback and say, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, you missed this big thing, right? Because they knew and had that expertise, and it led to much better products, right? And it also was an important moment to remind us, like, there are other pieces of expertise to this puzzle. Coming with that shared values, the connective tissue that pulls everybody together, right? What keeps people coming, even though they're coming from different disciplines or coming from different schools. Ryan shared the mission statement, and I think that's been a really important thing that the Collaboratory did early on, was craft together a mission statement. It's changed a little bit through the years, but it's largely been the same, and that has been an anchor for all of the work that gets done. It's something that we do return back to when we have so many different voices, right? To frame it, and it keeps us connected to each other. This art of partnership has been established in a way that allows for so many people to move into the space, right? I think we saw so many different classes, so many different faculty who have brought in different expertise, right? And that continues to be the case. And each one moves forward. So as we thought about the structure, how do you make it so that people with different talents can see themselves in this project, right? Can see themselves as contributing to this, which for most community engagement projects we know are interdisciplinary, right? Like, and then the last thing I wanted to sort of highlight that we've seen is the institutional support from both VCU side and UR side, right? Having folks who can think about the logistics, the scheduling, who know how to navigate the university to find resources to help with the project itself and to keep it moving, who can be a champion for that project in other spaces that faculty may not necessarily be a champion for that, right? To bring it up to different administrators. And so I think that has been a big part of how that continues forward. Terry, you want to add anything?
One thing is that I just was trying to be helpful in answering a question, but it made it sort of disappear. So Loretta, I want you to be sure to talk about the descendants and how they select themselves in to the descendants group and how that's been. There's so much of the story that there's not really time to tell, but I want to say that sometimes it's the small, seemingly small helps that having staff that are interested in supporting this play, like setting up meetings, is a hard thing to do. So scheduling meetings, always taking the notes, keeping notes in a different place, making them participatory notes, facilitating the conversations, has, I think, been a kind of a way that we could play a backbone role, and let the faculty and the descendants and community members who are passionate about the work lead the work. And that was a cool way that this developed as a project. We didn't start in the center saying, you know what, we'd like to have a cemetery project. It all grew out of faculty interest and passion and our desire to follow that. So that's all I'll say for now.
Okay, yeah. So next, Loretta, from your experience, could you discuss what you think makes an effective partnership among a university, universities, and community partners? Again, good and bad, strong, and areas for improvement, all welcome. I know there are questions in the Q&A. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to them at the end. Terry, I know how to find them, so no worries. We need to, Loretta, you're muted.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool. For us, the best part of this is that it provides us access to a wider world. If you see most of these cemeteries, you can see exactly what has been going on. I've told them a story. My mother would have been 119 this year, and she died, been dead over 50 years. But one of the things I remember as a little girl is her talking about how she had to go into a cemetery with perpetual care. And it didn't make any sense to me then, but it does now because a lot of her family is buried in these cemeteries, and we all see how they look. They didn't always look like that. And I think without the collaboratory, we would not be making as much progress as we are now making towards actually alleviating some of the problems attached to this. And so, again, I say thank you to everybody for everything that they've done for us and with us. They also have made, another good thing is they've made a lot of effort to try to include the community. And quite frankly, watching some of the projects that I see now that are quite, in some ways, an outgrowth of some of the work that has been done here with this group, with the cities doing in Chaco and some other things. They're not including the community quite as strongly as they might do. So we appreciate everything in that regard. Because if you're going to work in the community, you kind of have to get the community and not just the leaders, so-called leaders, that are in there. I don't really see very much of a downside to both participating with them or them in what they do. I really just don't. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. And as you uncover issues, you work on them. And I also will give them kudos for that. Give us kudos for that. Is that if something comes up, it's immediately worked on rather than, oh, let's push this to the side, let's deal with this later, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you very much. And I look forward to answering any questions.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. So I'm going to move on to the next perspective, which is Will. So as a student who's been involved with the project, talk to a little bit about how you benefited from working and learning. So in other words, both as kind of a participant, but also as a student, to give them those sort of two different perspectives from your experience.
Sure. Well, I think for me, taking classes with the Collaboratory, it kind of makes that education more tangible, and it makes these like service-based projects a lot more, it makes it feel like you are learning something to benefit the greater good, which is kind of why I went to school in the first place. And so like working with the descendants and the members of the Collaboratory, it just kind of was a lot more rewarding, and it made me just kind of want to keep doing that in my professional career. And I think that's just something you can't really get anywhere else. And so I think I'm really thankful for that.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the last one. So Ryan, talk to us a little bit about how the partnership supports faculty research and scholarship. Because again, just to sort of put it all together is how much benefit emerges from just a well done, well constructed, deeply engaged partnership.
Well, yeah, all the faculty that engage with this have other responsibilities, other duties that they're working on, not only just teaching their classes, but many of them, most of them are expected to produce their own scholarship too. And that has never, from my historian's perspective, been a problem. You know, it helps me as a historian. And I can say that the book that I was able to write a few years ago on Richmond's historic cemeteries just would not be the book that it is without the kind of conversations and exposure that I had in seeing and working alongside this effort. There's been others, certainly, that we could point to, these kinds of traditional scholarly productions. Megan Goff had a really exciting couple series of articles come out in some urban planning academic journals. I know Wyoni Edwards Ingram is an archaeologist at VCU in our focused inquiry program, but lately she's been inspired to turn more towards archival records and look at histories of African-American drownings in the region. She's built a research project up out of that. There's been collaboration among Collaboratory fellows. Steph Spira, Beth Zazamia partnered with a student and with myself. So these were geographers and spatial analysis lab folks who worked with me, and we got a co-authored article published in a journal of archaeology that discussed mapping and the histories of these sites. So I could rattle off probably a lot of examples of this. Maybe I'll just mention one other instance of collaboration, where Brian Palmer and Aaron Holloway Palmer were able to collaborate. These are our community partners in the Friends of East End, collaborated with that Duke initiative, the Durham initiative, to co-author a nice book chapter on East End Cemetery and the modern politics of its preservation for a collected volume on Southern graveyards. So we're all really proud of the kind of scholarly work that this seems to be fueling. But for me, maybe the most important takeaway is it has helped me, and I think my supervisors, question or think about what we mean by scholarship and what we mean by research. Because you could point to things like these digital maps that we've produced or the archive that we've developed. And those don't always look like a traditional line on one of our faculty members' CV, but they certainly show a great deal of research and effort. And the challenge, I think, for us as faculty members sometimes has been to think about what scholarship might look like in this community engaged way, and what kinds of products we might think about as scholarship that aren't always thought of in those terms. So I'm sure there's more to say, but those are my thoughts, at least initially, on certainly the selfish benefits of faculty who are able to draw upon this energizing work to build it into their own research.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue to my next question, because although you talked about selfish, one of the sort of North Stars really of building effective partnerships is that they're mutually beneficial to all involved. Doesn't mean we all get the same benefit, but everyone benefits in the way that makes sense. And they're sustainable. So given the success of this partnership and the perspectives on the panel, I'm asking all of you, and you can sort of volunteer to jump in, or I can call on you. We'll see how that goes. What advice would you give others looking to build a mutually beneficial, sustainable partnership? I know that, you know, listening to your conversations, you're hinting at it or saying it perhaps in a less direct way, but I'm going to sort of ask it directly. If you're going to give, I don't know, 3 pieces of advice or 2 pieces of advice, what would you suggest? How would they get started? How would they design a governance structure? Whatever answer emerges for you. If anyone wants to volunteer, if not, I will call.
Well, I'll say one thing. We sometimes underestimate, it's hard to be patient in those early conversations, but you don't know what community need is until you sit and talk with community members. So it was some of those early on convenings over lunch and inviting lots of people to the conversation who didn't have commitments yet, to allow the commitments to make themselves known. and then people choosing that they wanted to be involved. And the need was so clear. It had such great both physical on the ground need, as well as the products of needing to know who was buried there, records for descendants. That really helped those early conversations take shape quickly. But overall, it does take a lot of patience in those early conversations.
Yeah, it's great advice.
I had a couple thoughts I'd offer. The first is it helps to have a variety of expertise in all the kinds of ways that we think about expertise. The Collaboratory really began, I think, between a conversation between a biologist and an archaeologist. And so it was kind of, if you think if it was just two archaeologists talking to one another or two biologists talking to one another, we probably don't end up in the kind of place that we're at that is able to provide so much room and so much inspiration from all these different directions without that starting point that's already has some variety built in. And the second thing is, if I'm giving advice, I'm just thinking about how we've been able to grow, and none of this would be possible without, and I think Derek and others have hinted at this, the really active participation of our community partners. We just cannot overstate the kind of commitment that we see in the Friends of East End, or the Descendants Council, or the Woodland Restoration Foundation, or the Star of Benevolence out at St. James. These are folks who are taking, as Loretta is right now, taking time out of their day, out of already a task that is monumental in front of them, and spending it walking, alongside us, with us. And so without those very active and capable community partners, there's no way that we get to where we're at.
Okay, Derek,
Yeah, everything that's been said is huge. I did want to follow up one thing about the scholarship, just to say that our community partners hold us to an incredibly high standard, right? I mean, they like sometimes people say, oh, communication maybe not as rigor. No, the rigor that they put on what gets out there is really, really high, right? They demand excellence. They demand it to be right. And they've called us out when it hasn't been. So I just want to plug that. In terms of, the mutually beneficial, sustainable partnerships, kind of maintaining them. You both hit it. The commitment to showing up has been really key, right? Keep on showing up. And one of the things I love is like when this started, the two faculty members went to the East End and took time at a volunteer day, and a couple of them, right? And so they went to the cemetery, they saw what was being done, they learned about it and kept on doing. And that commitment to keep on showing up in the spaces is really key. So yeah. The other thing is thinking about the various networks, right? Those various perspectives, those various points of view. And then I think what's been helpful for this one is when it started, like now you see 7 years and you see so much different works being, so many different pieces out there. But when it started, there was sort of classes were going to be connected, and there was going to be an immediate thing that could be help the community, students doing service out at the site, right? Clearing the ground. And so I think that was really helpful to have something that right away you could see there was some benefit, and creating a map of the East End, the digital map, right? That was that first project that was like, okay, we're going to make this happen. And it took a while. There's a lot of learning that had to happen and a lot of expertise there. But that was clear. And over the time, it's kept on expanding, but we started much smaller, right? And so I think sometimes as we think about these projects, thinking about what are those early wins and then how do they snowball into more.
excellent. Thank you. Loretta?
Unmute.
On this one. I'm just always in awe of getting to participate in this. And if I had to give advice, it would be to say start with the community first. If you have the idea or you have a thought that might be an idea, and just to jump and go out. A lot of academics of my acquaintance, not these people, but some others over the many years. And others that I've worked around, you know, they get caught in their silo of this is what I do. I'm a regulatory body. This is what I do. I'm an academic. This is what I do, whatever it is. And they don't go out into the community. And if anything ever touches the community, even things that might not seem like it could, just go out there and gather. And yes, you might get some resistance. You might at first, because people may not understand why you're here, because usually they're not used to people like you being there. But come on out anyway. And that's what I appreciate that they were open to, willing to do, and did. So that would be my one piece of advice. And then everything else can flow out of that and sometimes flow fairly well if allowed to just go down its natural channels. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Will, last but not least.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways for me, because like when I first started with the Collaboratory, I was just, as a student, I didn't really know what I was doing and I was very intimidated. But I think all the members of the Collaboratory are really good at just treating everyone as equals and respecting their whatever knowledge they bring to the table and just kind of like helping uplift everyone to kind of understand on a greater level. And I think that's something that's really important, and it's definitely commendable as well.
Excellent, thank you. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move into audience Q&A, and then depending on if we have time, do a last round of sort of final thoughts. But so I'm going to go to the first question. I know, Terry, you answered it, but you wanted me to share it with Loretta. So the question was, how was the descendant community selected?
Mostly we self-select ourselves in. Sometimes it's randomized stuff where we've actually gone out occasionally and we knew of people through various means and we said, hey, do you want to be involved? Some have said yes, some have said no. Some have been involved and decided to become disengaged. Others had never been involved and decided to come engaged. So that's mainly how that happens, is that they throw themselves in, sometimes through invitation, sometimes by just starting things themselves because they saw a problem or see a problem and want it taken care of.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll also invite people, if you still want to ask questions, feel free to keep dropping them in the Q&A. I'll go with the ones we have, but you're welcome to add more. So next question, do all of the cemeteries that you all work with have perpetual care now? Like seeing all shaking heads, no.
They certainly don't, and even the ones that are owned by the city, such as a place like Barton Heights, still struggles to receive proper regular care. Barton Heights is in a weird situation in that it doesn't accept further burials, unlike so many of the other city cemeteries. So that, in other words, there's not an income stream coming in to support that. And the way the city's funding of its cemetery operations is all the priority goes on the sites that have an income stream. And so there had been perpetual care set aside in some element of the city, but that got reappropriated decades ago. And so they're sort of flying by the seat of their pants at the moment in terms of funding. And I know Loretta has always had that in mind and trying to lobby the city so that they can restructure this so that places like Barton Heights or other non-active city cemeteries, for that matter, are not always the last in line for care. But other places like Evergreen and East End, I'm sure folks are familiar with the Enrichment Foundation debacle and its dissolution over the last couple of years. And so not only do they not have a perpetual care fund as of right now, they don't really have a legal owner. So they're in legal limbo. And so basically all the resources that they get are donated resources at the moment. So that's a big challenge.
All right, anyone else want to add anything to that, or I'll move on? All right, next question. This is great. Thanks everyone for this presentation. Is this work affiliated or associated with the work at the Lumpkins Jail Slave Site or the University of Richmond Burial Ground Memorialization Project?
I'll jump in and please clarify. Short answer, no, and not officially. The slightly longer answer is Richmond isn't that big of a place, right? So many of the people who are in those conversations are also in conversations with us. And so the conversations overlap frequently, although the Collaboratory has not worked on either one of those projects.
For downtown, for the Shaco project to Lumpkins or the African Burial Ground, I'll say that occasionally we've had fellows and partners engage with those sites with their classes. I take my students down there on tours as part of our engagement with various sites across the city. But for the most part, I think the most time that we've spent have been at East End, at Woodland, at Barton Heights, and St. James recently. And so it's important, I think, of course, to keep in mind that we've got plenty of other African-American cemeteries, some dating back, to the earliest days of the city, that are undergoing commemoration. And so this is part of that commemorative landscape. But that's one of the challenges, frankly, of the Collaboratory is where is our focus going to be? Where is our energy going to be after we expanded, broadened out to more than just East End Cemetery? That raises a whole other thorny set of questions. Where then does East End Cemetery fit into this larger landscape that we're engaging with? And if other groups outside of the groups that we've already been engaging with reach out to us, how do we make those decisions as to whether to, offer some support or to engage with them in some way? And so it tends to be fairly organic. Back to some of the conversations we had before, it's not a top-down type of a group. We just have conversations among ourselves and see where the consensus leads, see where the passion of the community members or our partners or our faculty or our students are. But that maybe for me has been some of the more difficult elements of the Collaboratory is figuring out, where to spend our time and attention and relationships for one site maybe versus another site.
Just looking if anyone wants to add to that. Okay, thank you. Great, and I will keep moving on. So next question, and again, invite the audience. We have just a few more minutes. So if you have a burning question, please put it in the Q&A. How can I create a service learning opportunity for my students? So you definitely sparked some interest here.
Could we turn that around to you, Sherry?
Me?
Does your office support everything I know about service learning? I've learned from Terry and Derek and Heidi here at VCU before that, Lynn, so many others. And so I tend to just think, well, I get a wild here. My students should do this, or I'll learn from another faculty member. Yours are doing that. Mine should do that too. And so that those categories of service learning sometimes, I don't think that's the spirit of the question. The question is how do you begin that kind of work with your students? But I don't know. I'd lean on Terry or Sherry maybe for the more programmatic way to.
I think what I'll do is I'll let Terry answer for U of R, and I'll answer to the degree that I can, which is more going to be who do you talk to in VCU?
Yeah.
But just because I'll be honest with you, the person who asked the question doesn't have a VCU or U of R email, so I'm not sure where the question stems from. So we'll both answer it. How does that sound?
That's great. What I was going to say is that one of the reasons that the Collaboratory has continued on as it has year after year is every year we put out a call for applications of people who want to join the collaboratory. And if you would have a class that you'd like to create a service learning opportunity in, and you're at, well, U of R, VCU, although we're also trying to work with other universities, you can
Yeah.
apply. And part of our process is we'll work with you on what are the opportunities going to be for service this fall. There'll be a couple of cleanup days. Oh, great. VCU adjunct. So yeah, you can
Okay.
talk to Ryan about that. And then I don't know about service learning designation for VCU. We don't do that at U of R.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I'll answer in two ways. I'll answer just how the process at VCU, and then I'll pass it to Ryan to just tell how you can get engaged in the collaboratory at VCU. How does that sound? So I guess basically service learning is really run out of academic affairs, particularly the real office. And the person sort of overseeing it is Shansa Isom. And I would recommend that you get together with her, because that we do actually have, and I don't know the details, and I probably should. There are actually pretty clear details as to what constitutes a service learning class. There are variations of them. So that would be a first step, just to learn about how to do it formally at VCU. And so what I will do now is pass it to Ryan to just talk about, because there are ways for faculty to get engaged with the collaboratory at VCU as well.
Sure, yeah, and I would also piggyback on that and say, refer back to Will's comments about the student experience there. I think we all recognize how enriching, how inspiring, how exciting it can be as a student to do those kinds of courses. So I think that whether you're at VCU, you are, other types of institutions or schools, this is a really exciting way to think about learning. It certainly changed the way I've done my teaching. And so think about within your own institution, if there's any barriers to doing that or how you could get around those barriers. But for the specific question of how you could get involved with the collaboratory, refer back to our website, cemeterycollaboratory.org, drop us a note. We will be recruiting formal faculty fellows for next academic year. We typically run on an academic year cycle. And so we're getting ready to wind down our current academic year within the next month or two. There'll be a little bit of a lull in the summertime, and then we'll start back up with a new arrangement in the fall again, or in August at the end of the summer. And so we'll post an announcement for a call for fellows. And it's not a very complicated application. It's just kind of who are you, where are you working, what kinds of things are you working on, what elements of the collaboratory catch your eye. And after that, we should be off and running, at least with a conversation, if not welcoming you into the collaboratory itself. So as I said, it should be within the next few weeks, I would expect that we'll have that call out. And so we'll be taking applications for fellows over the next couple months, I would imagine. Oh, you're on mute, Sherry?
Yeah, yes, I was. So he responded, I currently teach a service learning course and I'm looking for more opportunities. So this might be a way of making that connection and just reaching out to Ryan and the team here. And also just to point out, we'll put in the I'm actually gonna cut and paste that. We'll put in a link to everyone to the student projects if people want to take a look, and I'm actually expanding that. Okay. So I think I've got, got another question. Just a thank you. Thank you. All right. I think with that, it looks like we've got 2 minutes left. So I think we did a good job keeping to time. We're just an hour. So with that, I'm going to thank all of our panelists for their willingness to share their story and their perspectives as to what we think is a very inspiring and model community partnership. I want to also thank L'Oreal Bolden, who I know you've probably seen her photo in the thing for providing all the technical backup and support that's so important, that Terry also mentioned that we tend to neglect, recognizing how important that is. So just to thank her for all her help with that. And thank everyone who's sort of stayed the distance and joined us for the panel. And that is, so just thanks again to Ryan, Loretta, Will, Terry, and Derek, and L'Oreal for making this a wonderful hour for us to spend our time. And again, you will receive follow-ups with us. This is recorded, so we will share it when we get it, and you will find additional information from us in that email about how to, if you're interested in the Applied Community Badge, how to access that. So with that, I would say have a wonderful Thursday afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you. I think that was an inspiring event. All right.